Welcome to Faith Over Pharma, the podcast for couples trying to conceive after a vasectomy reversal. I'm Susan Gladstein, holistic reproductive health practitioner, functional nutrition specialist, and your fertility detective. Around here, we talk about all the things mainstream medicine often misses and the faith that it takes to keep going when you wanted a baby like yesterday. If you're tired of being told to wait, to retest, or just move straight to IVF without anyone looking at the full picture, then you're in the right place. Have you ever had that quiet feeling that something about the way we're doing childhood, education, and health decisions just isn't sitting right? Maybe your child's in school and you're wondering why they're exhausted, anxious, overwhelmed, or slowly losing their love of learning. Maybe you've even felt that nudge to homeschool, but immediately thought, I could never do that. I'm not qualified. I don't even know where I'd start. Or maybe over the last few years, you started realizing how many decisions we've been taught to hand over to systems, education, medical choices, even the way that we think about our children's health. Now you're asking those harder questions. Questions like, who actually gets to decide what's best for my child? What if the system that I was taught to trust isn't always protecting my family the way I thought it was? And how do I start taking back responsibility without feeling overwhelmed, afraid, alone, all the things? This conversation is for the mom who's feeling that tension, the mom who wants to be wise, not reckless, but also wants to be deeply connected to her God-given role as a parent of her children. Today, I'm joined by Cheryl, which I'm very excited about. She's the host of the Homeschool How To Podcast, a mom of two who walked away from a 16-year career to homeschool her children, and now she helps other families see that homeschooling does not have to look like recreating public school at the kitchen table. And she was a huge asset to me when I first started my homeschooling journey. Through her podcast, she interviews homeschool families, experts, parents who are asking all of these questions and what it really means to raise children with intention in a world that often just wants parents to outsource their instincts. So I would love to go back to the beginning. We've done a podcast episode before together. Obviously, I'm a faithful listener of your show, but for those of you who aren't familiar, I would love for you to kind of take us back. What was happening in your life when you first started questioning the traditional school path, and what made you finally decide actually to leave your career to homeschool?
Susan, thank you for having me on. I was so honored to have met you when you came on my podcast, and everything that you read right there, like that gave me chills all over again. And even like I teared up a little because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just remember feeling that way. And I still, I remember feeling that way and feeling helpless. And it's not until like the last 3 years plus more, but the 3 years that I've been interviewing people on my podcast, interviewing homeschooling families specifically, to kind of learn about this lifestyle that where now I can be on the other side and totally confident. Like, of course I have agency over my child's life. Of course I'm the decision maker. But I do remember being in that situation where like, well, I don't have the authority to tell a pediatrician, that if I don't want them to get a vaccine. I don't even feel that I have the authority to research the vaccines because they know better than me. And I don't have the authority to take my kid out of school or out of daycare, and reclaiming that. And the only way to do that is really to talk to people who have, I think. And it has just changed my life to a complete 180. So yeah, going back to the beginning, it started with COVID for so many. It did. That was such a strenuous time for a lot of people, but there was a lot of us that woke up out of our slumber, that whole like ignorance was bliss kind of life where in a way it was, but right now I'm so much happier, I guess I should say. So I guess ignorance wasn't bliss, but it was easy. Yeah, they started masking 3-year-olds in New York State. My kid was in daycare. I worked for the government, and I could put up a fuss at work with the masking thing and kind of, slander my own name, I guess, because who cares? But when it came to my kid, I was like, my husband and I both said, we're not putting a mask on him. He's 3. He's learning to talk. You're not going to cover his airways. You're not going to, cover his face so that he can't see emotion from other people. That's ridiculous. So that was our kind of line where we were like, we're pulling him out. And I did still work. I worked from home. I kind of went through hoops to be able to get a doctor's note to work from home. They didn't know I had him home with me. But so that was hard in its own right, but so worth it. And through that, I said, oh my God, my 3-year-old's got to socialize. I don't want him to be weird, right? Like we're all taught. But so the only people that were getting together were homeschoolers. So I'd look on Facebook and where are homeschoolers meeting up? Because they didn't care. They didn't need the mask. They were out there living their whole life like nothing happened. And, I would go to those meetups so that my kid had someone to play with. And I just started asking these people questions, almost like they were from another planet, And I was like, what do you mean? You just let them learn what they want to learn. Don't you have to answer to somebody? And in many states, you do have to submit something, but it is not what we think, especially when they're going to school. It is not, they have to learn X, Y, Z by this age or what your kid gets taken from you. No, that's not the reality of it. So I was really kind of like learning about this lifestyle in awe. But then in the back of my mind, still thinking, well, we're not weird people, so it still couldn't be us. And I met somebody that had a podcast, and I was like, oh, I didn't know you could just do that. Again, that mindset of like, you can only do something if someone gives you the authority to. So I started a podcast interviewing homeschooling families right after I had my daughter. She was just a baby. And all the rest is history. I quit my government job. I now realize like I'm kind of big on showing people how they can work and homeschool. And I totally could have done that. But I think that job, the government work was just sucking the soul out of me anyway. And I was like, if we can make it work financially where I can be home with them, I want to try that. I can always go back to government work later or start something else, which obviously I have with the podcast and all that. But yeah, that's where it started. And I love that you're here to help facilitate, get empowering parents to you have the right to do anything you want with your kids. You're going to want what's best for them because you're their
100%. I think, yes, COVID challenged a lot of that. It put a lot of emphasis on fear. And there was all these people going around tattletelling on one another if they weren't wearing a mask. And the people I found that got most upset about things, whether it was if you didn't wear a mask or you weren't going to get the vaccine, they were so mad that you were using your freedom of choice. Like that got under people's skin so much, which is a very interesting. I mean, we talk about like a lot of the flight attendants on flights that were just absolute jerks over that because they got some kind of power trip, I guess, that they could dictate if you wore a mask or not. And of course, I didn't go into any of that. I had a vaccine injury in 2019. The Lord really opened my eyes in 2019 on a lot of the stuff that was to come. So I went into 2020 very confident in knowing, and I would say not very confident. I was more confident than I would have been had I not had that experience and then getting my health back. It obviously led me down several rabbit holes to study all the things, but like you were talking about all those fears about homeschooling, I went through that because I obviously went to school. I was very, very bored in school. I was not challenged. I always think like how different my life would have been had I been homeschooled because I'm a very fast learner. I have a photographic memory. I was very bored. I wasted so much time just sitting and doodling. I never had homework. I never had to study for tests. So when I went to college, I was very ill prepared for that sort of system. And so going into, and obviously being part of the military, brainwashed into this, cult think or whatever, I really struggled in thinking about how I was going to homeschool and making that look like what I grew up, what homeschool should look like what it is in school. And there's all those memes that talk about, when your PE teacher is overweight, like, are they the right person to be teaching PE? Probably not. And I obviously get that question a lot, like, are you going to teach your kid, trigonometry or whatever? And I'm a lifelong student. So the idea of homeschooling was very appealing to me because I thought, well, whatever I don't know to teach her, I'm just going to learn. And now it's like we're taking a sign language class and a Japanese class, and I sit right alongside of her, like learning all of these things. So it's really opening my knowledge base. And that is so fun. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I'll tell you, my kid is the most social person on the playground. She's also my biggest hype girl. She'll go to every mom on the playground and ask them if they listen to podcasts. And if they do, they should listen to my podcast. So I'm hiring her as my business manager, probably in the near future. But we talked about some fears about homeschooling, and I've shared some of my own realities. How did that compare, like your fears versus, and I know you talk about this a lot on your podcast. So somebody who is like in that boat where they're afraid their kid's going to be weird or whatever, they're not going to be able to teach them. They need to listen to your show. But how did the reality compare to what your fears were?
Yeah, so I think I remember in the very beginning, my first episode was I listed like 10 reasons that I was scared to homeschool, but 10 reasons that I wanted, like that I was scared to send them to school as well, and kind of talked about the difference between the two. And so how that compares to reality is so funny, because I remember one of my fears was like, they won't get to go to prom. And even now I still get people like DMing me like, your kids will hate you because you aren't sending them to prom. And I, it's just so funny when you actually think about it, because like, was that day really that magical? Like you could still have a wedding day. There are so many proms. There are so many homeschool proms. So like you could just go on Facebook and find a group in your area that's going to have a prom. And they can do everything, the limo, the dress, the hair, the makeup, whatever. And also they can still be a date to somebody's prom, like, at a regular traditional school. So there's that. And it's so funny because 3 years in, and I just found out like a month ago, my husband said he never even went to his proms. He's like, no, they were stupid. It's like, what do you mean? Like, that's literally the premise. Our kid won't get to go to prom. And he's like, why? That is such a waste of time. He goes, I fixed up my car that I built from scratch. I drove it through like the drop-off line. And then I went home and hung out with like my guy friends. It's like, I didn't want to go to dinner and dancing. So it's like, who really wants to go to these proms anyway? We remember the excitement of, at least the girls do, oh, we're going to be in a dress and let's go dress shopping and let's get our hair done and our makeup done. But the reality of it was, this dress doesn't fit. I look fat. I hate my hair. He's talking to his friends and they're playing the song of the night. He's nowhere to be found. So it's like, you really have to think things through. Is it the nostalgia that you are thinking of, like, because you watch too much Saved by the Bell? Or is it reality? And if it's reality, is it something you can just recreate and probably make more fun for your kid? Yeah, that is. People are fearful because they don't know about it, which is exactly why I started the podcast interviewing homeschooling families, to be like, please convince me. That's how I started. Convince me I should or shouldn't homeschool them. And yeah, the way of living is so beautiful. And just to give you an example, now my kids are still young, right? They're 7 and 3, but I've talked to over 200 homeschooling families, and that first year I replicated school just like most everybody does. And you fight and you argue and you wonder why they don't appreciate that you quit your job to be here to teach them their ABCs, and they don't care about the ABCs because they just like want to watch Cocomelon or something or be outside playing with bugs. And once I let that go of like, we do not need to recreate school at home. You do not need to learn to read by age 5. It's okay. And I'm even pretty relaxed on the TV too, as long as like I know what they're watching. I find that like my son now at 7 has really no interest in watching TV, but my 3-year-old does like to watch. So whatever. But then again, I look at her, people ask me like how old she is all the time, because they're like, she's only 3. She can speak so clearly. And I'm like, I think Miss Rachel did that. Actually, she watched her for a long time. But it's just so funny because now, like, it's springtime where we are. We have a caterpillar kit that we got from Amazon. I'm, shamefully saying that we did get that from Amazon, because the ones that we found last year in nature turned into moss, or like they just died. So we, got the caterpillars from Amazon. You watch them make their chrysalis and turn into butterflies. Yesterday, the butterflies started coming out of the chrysalis. It's so amazing. With that, I got a nature study from Treehouse Schoolhouse, as a homeschool mom and content creator. And so she is a nature study. We do a different, topic each week. So I made sure that the caterpillars and butterflies was overlapping. So now we're reading books that we got from the library for free, all about caterpillars and butterflies. We're doing art projects through that nature study. And I'm not an artist. I hate that stuff, honestly. I'm not organized. I don't like to plan ahead. I don't like messes, and I'm not a creative bone in my body. But they make it so simple. They're like, here's a picture that some famous artist drew. Find on a globe, like where she was born in Germany. Find that on the globe. Okay, well, that's cool. Let's find it on the globe compared to where we live now. Now we're looking at a timeline. She was born in 1842. Where's that on the timeline in relation to today? Okay, that's learning. That's easy. And here's some watercolors, recreate the picture. And the kids are just, having a blast. Or here's some molding clay, recreate the caterpillar, now make a butterfly with the molding clay. And like, there's your art, there's your history, there's your geography. It's like, wow, all the science all intertwined in it. And then we're reading. So they're getting all of that covered. So, you can add in some math if you want. You don't have to because they're young. And it's just so beautiful that you can find a topic that interests everybody and is relevant to real life, because this is going on outside, and cover all your subjects. It takes under an hour. And like, how cool is that? He does a little handwriting. There's a poem, I think. Yes. So she has a poem that you say. She has a hand rhyme that you can watch her YouTube channel, and she'll teach you the little hand rhyme to do. And that's like a poem as well, and a folk song. So it's like, this is fun. This is what learning should be. So, and that's just one example. So I would say what I was fearful was silly. And then what we're actually experiencing, and yes, there are hard times, but like there were hard times when I worked a real job too. And parenting is just hard in general. So is it homeschooling that's hard, or is it parenting that's hard? You're parenting the whole time because you're trying to make humans that other people like and that, are good humans. That's hard. Okay. That's going to be hard if you're putting in the effort. So yeah, I think I'm taken aback at like, wow, this exists. And I was almost going to let it slip away and sit in my cubicle to get that pension at 60 years old.
Man, 100%. And I will say, so I have 4 kids. My oldest son, who's now almost 24 years old, was a very not easy child and struggled a lot in school. So I was always in the principal's office, I feel like, with him. But he's very type A, very much a hands-on learner. I was active duty at the time. There was no homeschooling. But I think now, seeing my 5-year-old, who is a very similar in personality, she's a lot sweeter, but very type A, very, very much a hands-on learner. So I'm a visual learner. I was teaching her as if she were the same as me, and how they taught me in school that worked really well because I'm a genius, basically, right? So I was pulling my hair out like day 3 because she does not learn that way. And I think how differently things could have been for my son if the school was equipped to teach to him. But there's a standard there, a minimum that everybody kind of has to make. And somebody who's very, very bright, like I was extremely bored with learning. So I always did my own thing because at least I had that going for me. But my son really, really struggled. And so he had a lot of behavioral problems because of it. And I noticed when I changed the way that I was teaching her and being more hands-on and interactive, it became a lot less frustrating and a lot more fun. And so you talking about your nature study, we've done some homeschool co-op stuff that she calls it a scavenger hunt, but it was basically learning all these different, science and math and whatever, incorporating all these things into one lessons where they were learning about birds or, things in nature. They listen to bird sounds and whatever. But I know that there's a mom that's listening that's like, I'm feeling the nudge. I want to do this, but I'm really not qualified. What do you say to her?
Oh my goodness. So if you're not qualified to homeschool your child or to educate your child because you had a public school education, why would you send them to the same place that educated you, right? Like if they didn't do a good job with you, why are they going to do any better? I think that any mother or father who loves their child, right there, you're better equipped than any teacher because you love your kid, you care what happens to them. There's no funding or Rockefeller education tied to what you are going to do for your child, where the school system, you can have the best teacher. best teacher in the world. It doesn't matter because they've got 30 plus kids in a classroom. Half of them have divorced parents who are maybe battling different things. You know, mom's got a new boyfriend, dad's never around anymore. They're going through, God forbid, there's actual like trauma going on. Now they're bringing all this baggage to class with them. Teachers are taught how to teach. They're not taught how to be psychologists and psychiatrists. So, I mean, I've talked to so many teachers that are like, we're just there to keep them alive. That's like our main goal. If somebody learns something, that's a bonus. So think about that as the parent that wants to homeschool and doesn't feel equipped. But also when you think about the amount of, I've interviewed about 200 homeschooling families. I want to say half of them are teachers that have left the school system to homeschool their kids. That number amazes me that it is like half. It's about 50. It is huge right now. Teachers are seeing the system. They understand that maybe when they started, you know, if they're an older teacher, they did have some creative ability, and slowly that got ripped away. Well, I wouldn't even say slowly. I'd say pretty quickly. It has been stripped from them. They no longer can do that creative project or, you know, do the book report on a book that just touches them. And they think this classroom would just love because of the types of kids they are. Nope, they do not get any agency over that. This is the book you're doing, or this is the project that you were doing. This is how much this is the percent that need to get 70 or higher on the test. Make that happen. And there really is funding. Some teachers, their salaries depend on like whether they get a promotion, I guess a raise is the better word. Whether they get a raise is actually tied to their students' test scores. Whether the school gets a grant is tied to these test scores. When you think about that, it's crazy. In other countries, they're taking, I think it's Finland, there's like 7 exams, the entire education of a child, where for our kids, it's well over 100. It's hundreds. And when you can stop and look at how other countries are doing it, I think it opens your eyes a little bit too. Finland doesn't even start formal education until age 7. And even that, it's hands-on, it's play, it's exercise outside. There's a really great documentary called The Death of Recess. It's on the Angel Network. I recommend that to everybody. If you want to see what's really going on, the guy, Spencer, oh my God, I want to say Spencer Pratt, and that's the guy from Laguna Beach. I'm seeing his Instagram handle. It's Spencer Vibes, but he was on my podcast. He researched basically how all these countries are educating compared to the United States, the test scores, the literacy rates, and he actually snuck into the biggest teachers union convention. He snuck in undercover. He was recording it. They are indoctrinating in the school system. This shows it completely. They think they're doing the right thing. Like they think they are altruistically trying to open these children's eyes that you can be any gender you want. You can hide it from your parents. Your parents are suppressing you, and they think they're doing the right thing. I think that's the scariest part about it. They're not even evil people. They think we're evil as parents for not wanting to confuse our children at a young age when everything is so confusing anyway. Why add this extra layer? And would these kids be so confused if they had more one-on-one time with their parents? And they might feel a little bit more like they have a place in the world. And doing projects like hands-on, they get to see kind of the fruits of their labor, like building something. Like you said, your son really liked the hands-on stuff. Hey, I'm digging this garden. I'm watching the seed go in. I'm watering it. I'm weeding it. I'm making sure there's sunlight. And then we get to eat literally like the fruits of our labor. That is a fulfilling feeling. So I feel like if it's just test, there's none of that. And that, yeah. And right back to how do you know if you're equipped to teach your kids? I just created a document, like a PDF that says like, this is what you are required to teach. So if you really wanted that, I can send you the link for that. But it's like, how do I know what I have to teach? How do I know what I should teach? How do I know what my state requires? How do I put it all together? When it says English literacy, but also spelling, but also reading, but also write, like, what does that all mean all in plain English? So like, there are resources like mine and like many other, I'm sure homeschool parents have created to make it super easy. It has never been easier to homeschool your kid than today.
100%. I appreciate just that perspective because I think that, yeah, we can all get sort of caught up on how things should be, which I think is just part of the well indoctrination. And I know, as you mentioned, a lot of us, myself included, kind of COVID really started opened our eyes to start questioning things, whether it's education or, medical decisions, just systems in general. So why do you think so many parents have been, I don't know, conditioned to trust systems more than their own instincts? And now that people are starting to question other systems, I know that happened for you. So I'd love for you to kind of go on about that as well. But yeah, when we all kind of collectively start thinking like, I don't know about this, sometimes it just helps having somebody else to cheer you on when you're like you feel like you're swimming upstream and maybe the people around you are not on board.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, to understand it, you can go back in history and look at where did our education system come from. It came from the Prussian model in Prussia. So this was back, I think, like 1800s. They saw that Prussia was educating their population because they wanted an obedient soldiers, basically. So Horace Mann and then later John Dewey brought that model to the United States. It started in Massachusetts, and even Rockefeller in the early 1900s created the Board of Education. He invested millions, and at that time, that was really a lot, millions into standardizing what every kid is learning. So if you just kind of think about like, Little House on the Prairie days where your community decides who's going to be the teacher. Like, hey, Mrs. Jensen has really good morals. She's good with our kids. She's going to teach our kids to read, write, and do math. And then they go home and they do their chores to help out with, around the house and do what needs to be done so that everybody can survive. And that's kind of what education probably should be. And they weren't there 8 hours a day, all year long. But then it turned into, once the Rockefellers got their hands in it, they are on record for saying, like, we want people smart enough to do the job, but not smart enough to question it. So as they were coming in as the oil tycoons and starting sort of the industrial revolution, they knew that what would benefit them is people who could be workers of theirs in their factories, but people that were not going to be smart enough to be competitors to their business. And it makes such logical sense when you see it that way, and you can verify this by reading books like Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto or Indoctrinating Our Children to Death by Alex Newman. They took the model, okay, so now everybody's in school. So Johnny that lives in New York City is learning the same thing as Billy that lives on a farm in Oklahoma. Why? Because they don't need to know the same things, but they are now. And we have an across the board, everybody's going to know the same thing. And now we've got to add testing to it because now we're going to start taking taxpayer dollars to fund this. And we have to show that, what we're producing, basically. So that's where the testing came about. Then they decided, let's get women into the workforce. They get many benefits there. They double the tax base because now not only dad is at work, but mom too. So now they're getting 2 times the amount of taxes in. Now they raise our school taxes all the time too. And they're also getting a hold of our kids even younger. When you think back to like when your parents went to school, what age did they start? I know for me, I was born in 84. I started kindergarten at like, I don't know, what, 5 years old. It was half a day. Now they not only have kindergarten as mandatory full day. I mean, it's actually not mandatory because I believe it, like in New York State, at least in my state, you don't even have to report as a homeschooler until first grade. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like across the board, if your kid's going to kindergarten, it's a full day kindergarten now. It's not even just half day. And now they have universal pre-K. So at 4 years old, you can send your kid to the elementary school on the school bus and it's covered by taxes. So they're basically in school at 4 years old now for a full day. And parents love that because they got to work. So their kids in daycare and it's covered by the tax dollars. So that's kind of the history and how it started. And now I got to think back to your original question.
Well, we were just talking about like people being conditioned to trust the system over their instincts and how for a lot of people, now we're sort of questioning why are are we doing the things that they're telling us to all the time? Like, is it really the right thing to do?
Yes, absolutely. And so now you're 4 years old. You're in school all day. You hear that bell ringing every 39 minutes. You raise your hand every time you have to go to the bathroom and ask permission. You are being told what you have to learn. You are being told what to read. You're being told to stand in a line. You're being told when you can go out and play. You're being told when it's time to eat. You literally have no decisions after 4 years old, and not that you have that many even before that at home. But there are literally no decisions that you can make on your own until you decide where to go to college. And then you're spending another 4 years, most likely, where they're telling you still what you have to learn. And then you get out of college and you have $200,000 in debt. So now you have to get a job, probably the first one that's offered to you. So now you're busy trying to pay back those loans. You can't afford a house. It's like all by design. Could go on forever, but you're so busy and you don't have the financial means to actually step back and be like, what do I want for my life? And that's where it all spirals. So we were never taught that we can think for ourselves. We were never taught that we can go, that like you can, they separate reading and spelling and math and science and language and all art and gym, all of that is separate subjects in school. And then they send you home with homework, and then they probably put you on soccer team or basketball team or baseball or whatever. So where do you find the time to be like, I really want to know about butterflies. Let's take tonight to learn about butterflies. That's just not happening in America, at least. Not in most cases. So I think that's why by the time we have kids of our own, we feel like we don't have any choices. We don't have the authority to make our own choices anyway. And when it comes to, medical freedom, that's a whole other ball game. If you think the Rockefellers only touched education and oil, no, they created the pharmaceutical industry. They put their money in there and they created the textbooks that the doctors are studying from in medical school. And it's a very convoluted sort of situation.
Yeah, I mean that's a big, obviously COVID really woke me up, and even my own vaccine injury really helped me to understand, like, God didn't make a mistake when he created our bodies. He wasn't like, shoot, I left that out. I'm so glad man has come along and created this thing. And for us, when we, ultimately decided in 2019 we were never getting any other vaccines ever again, because when I actually went down the rabbit hole and studied the ingredients in every single one of them, the incidences of disease and how that affects your overall immune system and all the things, when I actually was educated. And that's a big thing. Like, I would never tell anyone that they shouldn't do something. I want people to actually be educated so that they can decide for themselves. That was my biggest thing all through COVID. Like, I can tell you, it's ridiculous that they're saying that, you need this vaccine, which is actually not even proven to prevent. You're still going to get sick whether you take it or not. So why would you do that? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. But I wanted people to have the information to make the decision for themselves, not be forced into it. And when I started looking at all of it, to me, the pros did not outweigh the cons for my family. We take care of our body, we exercise, we eat good, we, drink water, we do all the things. And so I think they get you a lot on fear. That fear is what's going to hold you back and paralyze you from making decisions, or think that you're making the wrong decision. And so I'm really big on education. And I know for you, that was a big, your transition into homeschooling and opening your eyes, getting a little bit out of that system of actually free thinking, critical thinking that they really don't want us to do. I think that that's something that I always sort of had growing up, was good critical thinking skills. But if you really think about it, in the way that the system is built, they don't want that. My husband and I kind of joke, obviously I spent 23 years in the military, but I talk about it being a cult, because so many people, even going through COVID and the whole vaccine thing, my husband and I were like, absolutely not, we're not getting vaccinated. I was at 18, almost 19 years in the service, and they were really threatening me, like, oh, does that mean you're just going to give up your retirement? And I said, I will dig ditches on the side of the road before I will get this vaccine. Like, this is the hill. We used to say it was the hill we were going to die on. And instead we changed it to, this is the hill we fight on, because we weren't going to die over it. And it was one of those things that people just could not wrap their mind around. Why would you leave this job And I had lost my health. And if you don't have that, what do you have? Like, I literally couldn't get through a warm up of a workout. And fortunately, I was able to be completely healed from that, but I couldn't unsee what I saw in all of that. And so neither of my kids were vaccinated, which was like a whole other thing because I had my daughter in 2020. So that was like, we were those people in the hospital for sure. But I will say, even when my daughter was small and I was still working and she was in daycare, she wasn't getting sick. She's been sick once in her entire life, and we treated it with homeopathy, and she was great. I can't say that for all the other kids in her classroom. So when they were wanting me to submit my religious accommodation for my then 3-year-old, I said, you know what? I could write a dissertation for you and let you know, because it had to go up the entire chain of command because it was a military daycare. I could write all of this out for you. And the lady's like, yeah, I don't know why it wasn't approved or why it was declined. And I said, well, by law, I just have to tell you it's against my beliefs, and that's all you need to know. But okay, I'll do what you've asked me to do. I wrote 38 pages and never heard a peep back from them because I thought, well, if once it goes up the chain of command, maybe it will wake somebody up as to what is going on, what are people putting in their bodies. And so, but that's my thing, is like, it is very hard, and it was very demonized. Anyone who was questioning, stating, like all the stuff that ended up coming out later over, issues with menstrual cycles, fertility, all of that stuff, I knew before the vaccine was even created, just because I understood what the ingredients were. I mean, I really feel like that was the Lord preparing me for what was to come, to stand on that hill and fight. But I know for you, it was kind of like the homeschool thing and starting to question was what made you start questioning. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, because there may be somebody that's listening, either they haven't gotten there yet or they're too scared to go there because it's super controversial and everybody wants to tell you that you're crazy. If you're wearing a tinfoil hat, you're wrong.
Absolutely. And actually, yeah, so in New York, the state that I live in, you have to get everything on the CDC schedule in order to attend school. There's only 5 states in our country where you have to get everything on the schedule. Every other state you can get, like you said, the religious exemption. There are aborted fetal cells in these shots. I don't believe in it, and I don't want that in my kid. And that is all you have to write. And they can still go to school and not get the shots. So while we pulled him out of daycare when he was 3, my husband and I both said we were not going to get the shot. And then there was talk of it going on to the CDC schedule, which it is on the CDC schedule now. I think RFK he may have removed it, but it's on there as a recommended. Like, so if you don't know better and you go to the pediatrician and they're following the recommendations, your kid's probably getting the COVID shot and you don't even know about it.
Which is crazy, because that population is literally the one that everybody who I know whose kid got quote unquote COVID, it was like they said they felt kind of puny for half a day and then they were fine. Like, it didn't affect the majority of people. So what are you vaccinating against?
Right. And I knew that this was an mRNA technology, so it shouldn't even be classified as a vaccine. It is changing your DNA through like changing the messenger RNA in your body. It was not tested properly. There were so many people that had bad side effects, and they completely wiped them out of the initial numbers of the trials. It was so shady from the beginning. So we knew that we weren't doing that. And I said, this is going to be on the schedule. And now I watch The High Wire with Del Bigtree, and his movies, Vaxxed, Vaxxed 1, Vaxxed 2. Well, I guess Vaxxed and Vaxxed 1 are the same. Vaxxed 1, Vaxxed 2, and I believe there's a Vaxxed 3. And he just produced an inconvenient study which shows the comparison between vaccinated children to unvaccinated children, and the health differences is astronomical. The unvaccinated are healthier. So, and I had a pregnancy where I had gotten a flu shot at about, 10 or 12 weeks. And then the baby's heart stopped like within days. And I didn't think anything of that at the time. But everything coming together, I was like, I don't think I want to vaccinate the baby I'm pregnant with. And we're definitely not vaccinating my son with COVID. So we're in New York. What are we going to do? Are we going to drive to Vermont every day for school? I work in Albany. I'm in an opposite direction. what is actually feasible. And homeschooling was the thing that was like the most feasible, because even private schools, you still have to follow the CDC schedule in New York. So I think, one, we're not educated. We think that we just have to do all this stuff because that's what the authorities tell us we got to do, whether it's a pediatrician or the school board or what. And you don't have to do any of it. But yeah, when I started looking in, because I was nervous, I was like, but what if he gets the measles? What if he gets polio? Blah, 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 blah. So then you start actually looking into the death rates of the diseases, like you said, before vaccines came about. And then you start noticing in all the movies and all the shows where like they highlight vaccines. Oh my God, nurse so-and-so died on Call the Midwife because there just wasn't a vaccine. And you're like, oh, they're programming us. Like, this is programming right now. And that's why we feel the way we do. Most people feel so passionate about vaccines because we think so-and-so nurse whatever died from measles, and we think that's a real person. Meanwhile, then you can go watch the Brady Bunch where they all got the measles and they were like laughing about it at the time because it was filmed back in like the 70s when everybody was getting measles and it was just some itchy bumps, just like chickenpox. You probably got chickenpox. I got chickenpox. It's just itchy for a couple, like maybe 2 weeks. And yeah, maybe there's a little fever or anything, but it's just itching. But now there's a chickenpox vaccine. And if you asked a 20-year-old today, they probably think chickenpox is deadly. And so I started looking at the death rates of the polio and hepatitis, and why a baby needs hepatitis B shot, which is you get through intravenous drugs or sex, why they need that on day one. And then look at, okay, they only did a safety study for the hepatitis B shot for 5 days. So if a baby died on day 6, it was not in the safety studies. So and then, or day 10 or day whatever. So then that was bizarre. It was like, wait, well then what about the other safety studies? Like, we think they've gone on for years and years and years. No, that's just Viagra and whatever else that you just give to old people. But what we're giving to 1-day-old babies, they've only studied for 5 days. So then
and it was also based off of just a theory that they could eradicate Hep B in homeless populations if they vaccinated babies. And it was actually never proven that if you're vaccinated as a baby, that it even is still going to work as an adult. So I think once you do understand all of this stuff and you're open-minded about it, it can lead you on these like rabbit holes. Like, what else are they lying to me about?
Yes. And your pediatrician doesn't even know because they were not educated on vaccines. All they were taught in medical school was you give this at the 1 week, you give this at 3 months, you give this again. And now they've combined all of these vaccines too. So a lot of them had thimerosal and mercury before. Some of that has been taken out. I can't say it's completely removed from all of them, but then they're combining shots because they don't trust that you're going to bring your child back for all of the shots. So now your child might get 3 different vials, but there's about 4 vaccines in each one. So they're getting 12 vaccines at a time. These are tiny little infant bodies. That's crazy. And then it's not so much even the vaccine particles, like the virus particles themselves. It's the adjuvants that they are putting in the vaccines, the aluminum, and so they never test the combination of those 12 vaccines now that they have jammed into these 3 vials. They'll say, oh, well, that one little vaccine doesn't have enough aluminum to hurt your baby or cross the blood-brain barrier, but they've never tested them in combination. How easy would that test be? I mean, I'm pretty sure I could do it in my backyard with like a petri dish. You know what I mean? Like, it's not hard. They just don't want to do it because they don't want to know the results. They don't want you to know the results.
Well, what's crazy is, so if you have aluminum, for example, because that was, I think, the big issue that I had issues with. So anthrax has 600 micrograms of aluminum. Well, in any other circumstance, whether it's an IV or whatever, anything that's over 25 micrograms, with the exception of vaccines, is required to have a black box warning if it's over 25 micrograms, except for vaccines, because when they passed all of that stuff in the 80s, as far as you can't sue vaccine manufacturers, that was part of it. And so like the Tdap and MMR, I think those, like each shot has 600 micrograms. So if for a grown man, 25 micrograms is considered toxic deadly, needs a black box warning, but you're getting 600 times 3 or times 4. Imagine what that's doing to a small baby.
It's criminal, absolutely criminal. There should be people, and it's a great point that you bring up with the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act that was passed by Ronald Reagan, but it was also like this huge bill, and then they slipped this in, and it said you can no longer sue vaccine manufacturers because the vaccine manufacturers were losing so much money by getting sued by kids who, and I know it's called injury, and that never made sense to me before, because I was like, an injury is like you scrape your, elbow when you fall off a bike. But this is like an injury like inside the body, or an adverse reaction. There were so many adverse reactions and deaths that the vaccine manufacturers weren't making any money anymore. But there was a lot of money to be had between like lobbying and, hey, you pat my back, I'll pat yours, between politicians and the pharmaceutical industry. So they said, okay, we will make it so that you cannot be sued by the public. And now there's a little fund of money paid by taxpayer dollars where if your kid dies or is crippled from a vaccine, then you get some money in that little boat of taxpayer funded dollars. But that's so ridiculous. Is there anything else that you can give to people and then not get sued?
I don't know. You can pour a coffee that's hot on your body and stew. So because you didn't know it was going to be hot or whatever. I don't know. That's insane.
It is insane. It is so criminal. And I really do hope that more parents are waking up. And I think, yeah, you really do have to become more comfortable. And resources that I have used, whether you love her or hate her, Candace Owens did do a fantastic docuseries before. She went through each and every vaccine, what the death rate was before the vaccine, what the death rate is now after the vaccine, including the vaccine deaths. And, was it really, did the death rates go down because that's the time that sanitation and clean water came about?
Or they stopped spraying DDT, and that's why polio rates went down.
Yes. Or did they change what polio was even named, and now it's called transverse myelitis? And it's literally the same thing. Or, they fear the iron lung. Okay. There were such a small percentage of people that had polio that needed the iron lung, which is just a ventilator. And there are people on ventilators today with, a similar injury. So they renamed it as well. And there's just so many hidden things.
Yep. Well, and I always think if the side effect that's listed by the vaccine manufacturer, it literally is the very thing you're getting vaccinated against. Is it actually working? So paralysis is a adverse effect of polio. So is it worth it? I don't know. It may be for you. If you knew all of the data, that's my biggest thing. If you knew all the data, if it wasn't hidden, would you choose it for yourself? And I know that there's probably somebody that's listening to this that's starting to question all the things. Where would you encourage them to begin?
Oh, geez. I do have, I have a list of resources of books, podcasts, documentaries, and I can make that available to your audience. And then they can just see what, maybe if they don't like Candace Owens, but there's another great podcast, another great documentary. And there's so many books. I just started tallying them up for myself, and I can provide that for you so that they can pick what they're comfortable with, right? Because it takes more than one documentary to stand up to your pediatrician and literally get kicked out of the office in most pediatricians, because the pediatricians, they make their money off of the vaccines, even if they tell you that they don't. That's bullcrap. Yes, they do. And they have quotas that they have to meet. If they need 95% of their office to be fully vaccinated in order to pass certain things. So, we were kicked out of our first pediatricians. I went to a different one. I cried in his office because I was so I couldn't answer him fast enough. I didn't have everything memorized, and my notebook wasn't with me. And, so I left there crying, feeling so defeated. I'm in this alone. Am I going to kill my kids? What is going on? And then the more I talk to people about it, the more I know I'm confident in my decision. And we found a pediatrician that is totally okay with it. And yeah, she doesn't take insurance right now, but you know what the visit is? It's $70. And my kids, knock on wood, are never sick. So it's $70 a year for each of them. Come on. Yeah, you can pay that. And we have an HSA account with my husband's work, so we can get money through that. And then, God forbid your kid does need, like they break an arm or whatever, you can still go to an urgent care. You can still go to an ER. They're not going to deny you because your kid's not vaccinated. And a great point that you bring up, it's not to say nobody should ever get a vaccine. You have to weigh the risk. Where do you live on a farm? You're going to have different risks than someone that lives in the city. So it shouldn't be across the board. Everybody at every age needs all these vaccines, because great example is my friend, they didn't vaccinate their kids at all, but her son got an injury and like his finger was like ripped off, and they decided to get the tetanus vaccine in the hospital. Okay. So she was weighing her options. This is if he got tetanus, what he's been exposed to, maybe we need it. Let's do this one. Now he's older. We feel more confident that he'll react better than when he is a baby, because that's in the Tdap one. But a great example, there's a family that didn't vaccinate, but decided that this one was right for them at this time.
Yeah, I think that that's so important. I know for me, I read the vaccine book by Dr. Sears. It's very, like, he's a doctor and he kind of started questioning things. His dad was a doctor or whatever, but he goes through everyone, the rate of disease, death, your chances, like what's in them. So it's a very good way just to familiarize yourself so that you can make a confident decision. But obviously, I want people to make sure that they listen to your podcast, because there's so many great things there. So make sure you tell us about that, how to get a hold of you. And also, to close up, what do you hope that parents can take away from this conversation?
Okay. So yes, I will definitely send you my links so people can just click on them. But I'm at the Homeschool How To Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, great resources. Del Bigtree was a huge factor. I've met him a couple of times. He's been on my show. Huge eye opener for me in having those. And Dr. Sears has been on the High Wire, his show. Del Bigtree has the High Wire, all about these numbers, just like you're saying, the stats. So I would check out thehighwire.com and Dr. Sears' book. There's also Dr. Paul Thomas. So lots of that, but that'll be in the document I can give to you. And in the Homeschool How To Podcast, or the homeschoolhowto.com, if you want to just check out the website. But yeah, the takeaway would be your children are yours. There's literally nobody on earth that cares more about your kids than you do. There's nobody on earth that can do more for your child than you can. Homeschooling does not mean you are just sitting at a kitchen table with your child all day. You can outsource things. You can outsource Japanese lessons if that is what your kid wants to do. My kid would not ever want to do Japanese lessons. So I just know that that's just not going to be on our plate. But I think that's amazing that that's something that you're able to offer your child. My kid would probably be like how to take apart a dirt bike and put it back together. That's okay, because he can learn so much in that. And just if there's something I don't know, like if he does want to learn trigonometry, he can take an online course. He can go to a co-op. He does a wilderness school in the spring and in the fall. So every Friday he's going to learn about what plants are edible and what this tree is called and how to do the fire. I don't know that stuff. So it's outsourced. It's just you're making their education like tailored to what they enjoy, and then making sure you're hitting, the milestones that you need to if they ever did want to go to college and for what your state requires. So yeah, that I just want to let parents know, like, you have agency over your life and your child's, and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise.
Amen. That's a great place to wrap up. I am so grateful for you, because you were like a godsend to me when I first started and was all scared and thought my kids were going to be weird and whatever. And I'm grateful for the conversations that we've had over the last several years and all the work that you're doing, because it's incredible. So thank you so much for taking the time, sitting in your car outside while your kids are doing their thing, to be here. I'm very grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you, Susan. Thank you for your years of service.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Faith Over Pharma. If this episode gave you hope, clarity, or helped you look at fertility differently, share it with a friend who's trying to make sense of the waiting and all the conflicting advice. And if you're ready to discover what may be standing between you and the baby you've been praying for, head over to SusanGladstein.com.
Thanks for listening.